All right. How's it going, guys? Uh, my name's Bobby. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bobby.
Hello. Grateful to be at this online meeting. And I'm grateful that my friend Nick, who is kind of like a liaison, I guess. I don't know if he's here right now, but he did ask me to speak. And yeah, I was willing. And so I've never actually uh, been part of like an online meeting before, so this is kind of new. I'm actually at my local Alano club because at home I have members of my family that are sleeping. So I thought I'd just come here. Doors are always open, and yeah. So I guess I'll just really speak about a little bit about my story, about what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. So I'll start off by saying I took my last drink November 5th, 2014. And I'm grateful for that. So growing up, I kind of have an interesting story. I have alcohol when I was growing up, was never really around the house. I have one grandfather that was very abusive. He was a very abusive alcoholic to my dad. And after multiple stints in rehab, he actually did get sober with the help of AA. And he's been sober over like 30 years now, I think. And my other grandfather was also an alcoholic. And he died to the disease before I was even born. And so I never really met him. But that being said, growing up, my parents were not drinkers. They did not keep alcohol in the house, and it just wasn't around me. So growing up, I had a really good childhood, really nothing to complain about. I had two parents that loved me, and everything was good. And, I guess something that I should mention, I guess growing up, I've always felt like there was something missing in my life, like socially. Like everyone liked me and accepted me, but I do distinctly remember having a hard time fitting into any one like group of friends. Like I had a couple, like one or two really close friends, but like socializing outside of those few individuals was definitely kind of hard for me. So anyways, alcohol was not part of my story growing up. I actually didn't take my first drink until I was 19 years old, and that was in my freshman year at Western Michigan University. And I distinctly remember the night. I was invited over by my brother because he was going to Western as well. And he was like, hey, man, we're going to be drinking tonight, so why don't you come on by? And I was like, oh, wow. It's so funny because growing up, alcohol was not part of my radar. Like it was not part of my life. Ignorance is bliss, I guess you could say, because I seriously, growing up, like I never, like I guess I knew what beer was, but it never was, nobody that I knew ever did it. I was in band, I did a bunch of extracurricular stuff, I did well in school. So, yeah, it just was not on my radar. So my brother's like, hey, come and drink with us. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I can do that. So I remember going over to his like dinky college apartment. It's all dirty, and he had a fifth of pineapple rum. I think it was Parrot Bay. And I remember just taking shot after shot of that rum and just slowly as the night went on, just feeling better and better and better. And it was just like, wow, like, what is this like magical liquid that like makes me feel so fucking great? And I remember calling my high school girlfriend at the time, who she also did not drink. She was a good Catholic girl. And I remember just like thinking in my head, it was so funny that like she had no clue that I was, that I was drinking or anything. And I was just like laughing and like joking and stumbling around. And she's like, I was just lying to her about what I was up to. And so after that night, oh, and here's another thing. I woke up the next morning. So I ended up passing out on my brother's couch. I ended up puking on myself in my sleep all over his couch. Just woke up covered in bile and vomit and filth. And, I apologized to my brother. I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, what the fuck? And, even with that experience, like waking up in my own vomit, like the first thing I thought was like, damn, that was fucking awesome. Like that was fun. And like looking back on that moment, like any normal person, doing something that, they wake up in their own vomit, the first thought that they might have would probably be like, oh, wow, I shouldn't do that again. Or what, that was, but no, the first thought I had was like, damn, that was fucking fun. That was awesome. Like, where can I get more of this? And so basically my college career morphed from, it just kind of like looking back over the 4 years that I was away at university, I can definitely see the progression of my drinking where, when it first started out, I would like get it when I could. I'd go to the upperclassmen. I'd be like, hey, who can get me a drink? Who can get me a drink? Yo, I'll throw you 3 for a can of Four Loko. It's like, I do whatever I could. And then, what started as like, for the first couple months, I only did it like once a month. Then it became two times a month. Then it became once a week. Then it became every night of the weekend. And then by the time I was 21 and I had free access to as much alcohol as I wanted, that's when I definitely, you could see the cracks in my manageability of my life. Whereas before I told myself that I would never drink on weekdays, I had class in the morning, my mind started to manipulate itself and to make up excuses as to why, I deserve to go out, let's grab a 6-pack on a Tuesday because, I gave a speech in class today. So fuck yeah, let's go like get drunk, and so the drinking just kind of gradually progressed. And, I would show up, like I graduated, okay? And I went off to school for acting. That's what my degree is in. It's in acting. And I graduated and, all my classmates, they moved on with their lives. They were moving away to cities. They were getting internships at like theaters and stuff. And here's me, spent my entire college career drinking, and I did a number of outside issues as well. I did do a lot of drugs. I did a lot of a lot of things. and and so I graduate from Western, and I literally have this piece of paper. I managed to get by with as much that I drank, just kind of like I managed to get by my entire life. School was never that hard for me. I didn't really have to do a lot of studying in high school, in middle school. It just kind of came naturally to me. So I did manage, even though with the amount that I was drinking, I still managed to graduate. But really, I had that piece of paper, but I had nothing to show for it. And so I started just waiting tables in Kalamazoo. And that's really when my life started to fall apart. Because whereas before I had the structure of like school, I had people telling me what I need to do. Oh, you need to wake up, you need to go to school, you need to do your homework, you need to come home, and then you need to go to sleep and then wake up and do the whole thing. Or, in college, it's like college gives you a structure. And once you took that structure away, I didn't know what to do with myself. So I started waiting tables, and I just really, really started hitting the bottle hard. I started, showing up to work drunk, and I would get sent home. people would call me, worried about me, like, hey man, like you came in and like you were kind of like slurring your words a little bit, and like, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, and it's good, And so the summer after I graduated, I lived in Kalamazoo, and then I moved back home here to Waterford, and I live with my dad. And same thing. I got a job waiting tables, and one night I was out with a coworker, and at a birthday party, and I ended up getting blackout drunk. And I remember being in this apartment, and it was my cousin's apartment, and he was like, "Hey man, you don't seem so good. You don't seem so good. You shouldn't fucking drive." And like I had driven drunk hundreds of times. Whenever I went out drinking, like I would always drive myself home. Like de facto rule is like, I'm not fucking, like I can drive, I'm fine. And so I convinced him that, hey, don't fucking take my keys, I'm good. And I ended up making it about 5 miles home, and then I crashed my uncle's van. It wasn't my car, it was my uncle's van. And I crashed into a light pole, ended up going to jail. So, I remember my dad coming and picking me up. I'll be honest, I was fucking bawling my eyes out. I was really, really depressed. And I hated myself, basically. Here I was, I had thought so highly of myself my entire life. And here I was, like 6 months after graduating from university, and I've got no fucking money, like a shitty job, like basically nothing. I had nothing to show for my entire life, except for now I had a super drunk DUI. And so I was court ordered to go to counseling, and that's when I went to my first AA meeting. And I remember it was a young people's meeting, and I remember just sitting there feeling sorry for myself. And, I was like, hey, my name's Bobby. And I just remember like everybody fucking clapping and cheering and like rooting for me. And I was like, okay, whoa, like what the fuck? And yeah, I just remember like looking around the room and like listening to people speak and like hearing a lot of hope in their voices. Like they were at a point in their lives where they had felt like they had lost literally everything, or like thrown away literally everything by their own action. And, they were able to get their lives back together into peace of life for themselves, a life that's fulfilling and meaningful. And, I think something clicked in me. I definitely listened to what they had to say. And, I was really, really angry at first, because my alcoholic mind like wanted to tell myself that it was everything else about my life except for my drinking. It was everything. It was because my job is shitty. If I had a better job, I wouldn't feel this way. If I had more money, I wouldn't feel this way. If I didn't have student loans, I wouldn't feel this way. If I didn't have to live with my dad, I wouldn't feel this way. If literally every single aspect about my life could just change, that's what will fix my life. It's not the drinking. The drinking was not the issue. But then I was so depressed and I hated myself so much that I was able to get honest really quick. And, I reflected on how alcohol had really become this like dominant factor in my life. Like I look back at my college career and I realized that I wasn't there to get an education. I was just there to drink and to get fucked up and to socialize and to see who I could bring home and to, see what I could get before the weekend. What could I mix? What could I do? Where am I going? That's all that I cared about. All that I cared about was Friday, Saturday, and maybe Sunday. And, and I got honest with myself and I was like, fuck, Mike, I have this like obsession. Like why my entire, college career, why was I obsessing about drinking and getting fucked up? And why was I not able to focus? And, And so, yeah, I made up in my mind that I was an alcoholic. I admitted my powerlessness, and I admitted that my life had become unmanageable. And I got a sponsor, and I worked through the steps. And yeah, and slowly my life started to change. Now, I will say, ooh, I forgot like 5 minutes left. I will say that when I worked the steps for the first time, I had a very crucial moment. I worked the steps and I would go to meetings. I went to the same meetings every week and my life did get better. Maybe it's just for the fact that I was sober. I wasn't drinking, that I was able to get a better job. I still live with my dad, but at least today, like I'm, at a place financially where I can afford to pay my bills. I can afford to pay the car insurance, afford the gas, afford, my student loan payments, all that stuff. But for a long time, I lived, I think I lived in fear. I was very quiet. I basically sat in the corner in the same meetings and, kind of shared the same things. But there came a moment in my sobriety when I did my first fourth step. You're meant to sit down and take, a rigorously honest inventory about all the things that have happened in your life, all your resentments, all your fears, all the, sexual encounters you've had over your, in your life, wherever you're selfish, self-seeking, you're supposed to root that shit out and, identify it. Well, when I did my first fourth step, I was pretty honest, but there was one or two things on my fourth step that I did not put on the list because I was not willing to share with my sponsor. Very personal things regarding incidents that happened in my childhood, things that I thought and I justified in my mind that I was, over, that things that didn't bother me. And so I did not mention them. And so about 3 years into my sobriety, I was starting to feel kind of guilty about not sharing those things. I can only go to so many meetings and tell people how to work their steps when I really, truly fucking didn't get past step 4 because I didn't get completely and thoroughly honest. So one day I was praying and I was meditating and I made a decision. I was like, all right, God, you know what? I'm going to admit these things to another human being. And so I had a friend, not even a sponsor, just a friend that I felt, my best friend from high school, bless him. I was like, you know what? I only see him maybe 2 or 3 times out of the year, but God, I promise you the next time that I see him, I'm going to pull him aside and I will admit these things that I was so afraid to admit to my first sponsor. And so I was like, yeah, so next time I see him, I'll do it. And I shit you not, that was on a Sunday. And the very next day, I'm at work and my friend texts me and he's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm in town because of my sister's wedding. And I was like, oh my God. Now, talk about fucking spiritual experiences. I swear to God, that maybe, now I have a loving relationship with my higher power. Like I trust, I rely, I pray, I meditate, and I listen for what God would have me do. But I shit you not, that was the first like goosebumps, tingling, like, holy fuck, God, are you serious right now? And so I was like, yeah, man, I'm at work, but I guess, I'd really like to talk to you tonight. And he's like, really? I was like, yeah, I really need to talk to you. He's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And he's like, okay, well, I'll, just come on by. I'm at my parents' house. And so after work that night, I drove over to his parents' house. And we decided to take we used to go for a walk from his parents' house to the 7-Eleven, and we would get Slurpees. And we're like, hey, man, can we just do the walk? And he's like, yeah, let's go get some Slurpees. So we're walking, and I'm starting to explain. He knows I'm an alcoholic. I've told him this. And I start to explain why you do a 4-step, what the 5th step is, what we're meant to do, getting honest with, with God, and with another human being. You get honest with another human being. The only reason you do that is to show God, to show your higher power, which supposedly, if you believe in a power that's greater than yourself, or at least in my explanation, like, it should know everything. So why do I need to tell another person? The only reason is so that I'm holding myself accountable to that higher power. It's to show that higher power that I'm willing to humble myself and to get honest with somebody else, completely honest, so that maybe in the future I might be able to be completely honest with it alone, from then on. And so I'm explaining all this shit, and he's like, all right, man, like, just tell me this shit. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like shaking. And so I told him what had happened in my childhood. And, he just kind of sat, we're just walking, and he's kind of silent for a few moments. And he's like, that's it? I was like, yeah. He's like, really? I was like, yeah, that happened to me. And he was like, you know what? Like, that's not a big deal, man. That's really not a big deal. And we started like talking about it, and I started to get comfortable about it, and I started to share more about it. And, ooh, guys, I'm getting like fucking goosebumps right now, like recanting that story. I'm sorry if I'm going over. Is that okay? Is that okay that I'm going over? All right. I'm sorry. But I shit you not, guys. Like, after that moment, like, I think God, like, decided, like, all right, the rest of the steps. Like, I did the rest of the steps. But, like, truly, I never got past step 4 and 5. And I think God knew. He's like, that you've done the rest of the steps. You know how to do it. You know how to help others. So now that you're able to get honest with me, go forth and, do my bidding. Because after that moment, I swear I saw a huge change in my personality. I started going to different meetings. I started to approach people at meetings. I started to give them my phone number. I started to ask myself every morning, like, how can I help the next alcoholic? I started to ask God. I said, God, how can I do, your will, not mine be done. And I started getting involved with like young people's committees. And now I'm the treasurer of the Detroit area young people committee. I'm the secretary for the county committee of young people in my area. And I've got like 4 sponsees. And it's just like, after that day, like, I've had just such a strong relationship with my higher power. And I really, truly do believe that there's something working in my life, that's granting me the strength to see that I have, a life today that's worth living. There are things in my life that I have that I can be grateful for. And, prior to coming into AA, I was so selfish that those weren't things that I was able to see. I wasn't able to be grateful for my family that loved me, for my friends, for what I did have. I could only think like what life was not giving me. And that's just, pure sickness. That's the selfishness. So I'm way over time, guys. I hope that I was able to, stoke the recovery fire.